Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Founders Chair podcast. Andy Goldberg here. Today's guest is Alistair Meldrum from Albion Environmental. Alistair, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Why don't we just start by you telling us a little bit uh, about you personally, your personal story, and then we can get into business.
Okay, so I am a director of a company called Albion Environmental, which started in 2002. Prior to that, I used to work for, well, I was brought up in Grangemouth, which was actually quite an interesting place to bring up because they had great sports facilities, they had a dry ski slope, they had golf course, they had all sorts of stuff right in your doorstep. So everybody drives by Grangemouth and they think it's not great, but at the boom times, it was actually quite a good place to be brought up. So brought up in Grangemouth, went to university. I actually went to university at 16. I was 16 for a month or so. I celebrated my 17th birthday and 18th birthday in the same pub, much to the disgust of the pub owners, particularly my 18th birthday. So I was university, and then I worked for a company called Shanks and McEwen, who were based in Coatbridge. Worked there for four years, roughly 4 years, and then I moved to Ayrshire when I worked for Bar Environmental, and then in 2002 I set up Albion Environmental.
What do you do when you're not working? What's your pastime?
My hobby and pastime at the moment is running. I like to run. I like to run in the hills. Well, often it's not really running. Often it's stumbling around in the hills. So I'll do all sorts of running. I'll do cross country. I'll do road races. I'll do these ultra marathons. So so that could be the Arc of Attrition round Cornwall, which is 100 and something miles. It's probably in the brochure it's 105, but you end up doing 110 or something daft like that.
Well, my son likes to climb a Monroe, and sometimes he takes me with him. And he's bounding up the hill. I'm trudging up, trying to
Yeah.
stay up with him. And then somebody will just run past us. Is that, or is that you? You're one of those guys.
Well, no, if it's uphill, I'm generally walking, but I might be going a wee bit quicker than you. So I'm currently trying to do a round of the Donalds, and if people don't know what the Donalds are, they're hills over 2,000 feet below the Scottish fault line. So there's a few of them in the Ochil Hills and the Callendar Hills, and then most of them are down in the borders, Dumfries and Galloway, and so on. And the challenge with the Donalds is they're generally pathless, and there's not many paths, and they're often extremely difficult to actually literally find the summit. So there are a number I need to go back to and actually make sure I've actually made the summit because they're often quite challenging to find, particularly if you're in bad weather or whatever.
I'm
So,
laughing because when my son says we're walking up a hill, we're doing a Monroe, the first
yeah.
question I ask is, tell me about the paths and the signage. I ain't going if there's not clearly defined paths and signage.
I know I'm quite often map and compass in the mist, trying to make sure you hit the summit.
I don't want to
Uh,
be the next helicopter rescue.
well, you take your precautions. You carry your kit, and I do always, although I'll use map and compass, I do always have it. 9 times out of 10, I'll have the route downloaded on my phone,
Mm.
and you can get away with a lot with the watches nowadays that you can plot the route onto your watch, and you can almost use that as a compass as well. So the navigation nowadays is a lot easier. You know,
Good to know.
but
Good to know.
fully respect to people that go out there totally 100% map and compass and navigate around in the dark or bad weather. It's an impressive skill.
It is indeed. So tell us a little bit about your business story. How did the business come about, Alistair? And also, at what point did you have the confidence that you could run your own business?
So my background was I often say to people I had sort of three wrong turnings in my life. So I did environmental health at university, and the logic was I would become an environmental health officer at council. But when I was at university, I used to teach skiing and windsurfing, and that was probably more important to them at the time than actually doing the environmental course. So you had to, but once you finish university, you had to do 52 weeks of practical to get qualified. Uh, I then struggled to get a job with a council after I left university, and an opportunity came up with Shanks and McEwen. And I remember going to see my lecturer, and I was like, "What do I do? I've got this. I've got that." I had by this time I had a council job, and it was probably paying 12,000 a year, and this Shanks and McEwen one was paying £8,500, but a ban. And he was very much definitely take the Shanks one, but you'll never get that opportunity again. So that was the first, if you like, wrong turning I took. I then worked for that company for 4 years, and it was brilliant. I looked after sites from the north of Scotland down to Wales. Just learned so much. Just I went onto sites, I talked to people, I engaged with people, and I was just like a sponge in terms of picking up information. Because I was doing environmental compliance, I used to latterly I was starting to think these managers know nothing. They don't care about the environment. They're not doing this. They're not doing that. Why are they not doing these things? So I then went into operations, and I soon realised that operations was certainly not easy.
Mm.
You have so many competing demands. You have staff issues. You have health and safety issues. You have so many things that are so, what I thought was sort of easy to deal with in terms of environmental compliance was actually quite challenging in terms of fitting in the picture. So
Yeah.
I effectively managed two landfill sites that were handling, at the time, we were probably handling 500,000 tons of waste a year. So pretty big operations, one up at Dumbarton and one in Ayrshire. And latterly, what was happening was the company, it was Bar Construction effectively, they were going through some troubled times in terms of cash flow, a lot of money getting spent in an ice hockey team and a football Ayr United. And we were profitable, but we were getting sort of starved of investment. And by this time, I was thinking I need to make a bit of a change. I then thought, where's the industry going? The industry's moving away from landfill to incineration. And I worked for a small company in Irvine that ran a clinical waste incinerator. But it was really that story about jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. It was a dangerous, dangerous place in terms of the owner manager was just not, a really clever guy, but just not running the plant to the standard that I would suspect. So I started there in September 2001. And I remember quite vividly the first week driving home. My son at the time was just over 1.5 years old. I was the main earner at the time. And I remember driving home thinking, what the hell have I done? Where have I gone with this? So before that, I'd had a bit of a notion that I'd quite like to go self-employed. Uh, just, some of the things I could do some training work, I could do some consultancy work. I had a bit of a notion about that. And that was really the driver to say, I need to get out. And I literally set myself the target that by the end of the year, I was putting in my notice. And on the 1st of January or the 2nd of January, I was going to start up myself. Uh, and that was the effect of that. And what I was really fortunate about was because I'd made that decision, I had that 4 months to sort of plot and do all the sort of, if you like, the stupid admin stuff, the setting up the bank account, the meeting the accountant, the doing this. And because the operation I was running was 24 hours a day, what I was able to do was say to the manager at the time, say, look, I'll work a back shift. I'll come in at lunchtime. And what that meant was in the morning, I could do all my prep for getting my business ready. Now, some people would say that's taking advantage of the company, but the company was a dangerous, dangerous place to work. It was, and then they did eventually fold after. In fact, I actually got consultancy work from the company after I left,
Well, you were
so
you were
they
putting
did
in your
become a
hours.
customer.
You were just changing the shift. You were putting in the hours. So I wouldn't say you were,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
but
so that was it.
um, I think a lot of people can probably relate, Alistair, to your "what have I done" moment. And when I ask a lot of business owners, what made you decide to go into business for yourself? And very often, it's one of those moments where they jumped into what's the expression? Jumped into the fire,
Yeah, yeah.
and they're like something. And sometimes, I mean, so it's sounding to me like often we need that moment to spur us
Yeah,
on.
we needed that. I needed that thing to make it happen, to actually drive it forward and turn it into reality. And it was, there was a real harsh reality there. I was still the main, the main earner of the family. So I needed to start in January, and I needed to know that I was earning, you know, X number, 100 or 1,000 pounds. There was from memory, we had no buffer. We had, could have maybe survived a few months, but there was literally no slack there to, keep paying the mortgage and pay on all the bills.
So at what point, I want to get into the company currently in a moment, but at what point in your journey did you feel you had the confidence to succeed as a business owner, as a director?
I was I was very lucky that a customer of mine, when I was at a bar, phoned me quite soon after I moved to this incineration company and basically said, "What the hell have you done?" And we had many. Besides, he was basically this incineration company was basically a competitor, and we had quite a few discussions. And he said, "Why don't you phone a gentleman called Robert Drummond, who ran a landfill site down near Lendal Foot?" He said, "He's needing a bit of help. Go and have a chat with him." So Robert was my first customer, and he signed up to 3 days a week in terms of me providing support for the site. So effectively at the start, I did 3 days a week there, and then all I had to do was find probably another day a week. And with my existing contacts, I could do that. And I remember quite vividly the first month or so, I remember sort of looking behind me and thinking, this is too easy.
Yeah, well, you were just doing what
Some,
you always did, right? You were just being a consultant
yeah,
as a supplier rather than an
I,
employee.
I was still doing my landfill manager's job effectively, but I was doing it as a consultant on a day rate. And I do vividly remember looking back and thinking that this is too easy. Someone's going to go wrong. It's not going to, it's not going to be this easy for that long sort of thing. I remember overthinking, I needed to buy a laptop, and it was, at the time it was probably, I don't know, 800 quid, and you overthink it. At the time I used, you know, basically the real start, I used my wife's car, which was a wreck of a car. And I remember one day it broke down, and I basically lost the day's work. I lost, say, 350 quid's worth of revenue. And I was thinking, this is daft. I can go and lease a car for 300 quid a month, 400 quid a month. And that means I'll know I'll go to the site and earn my 350 quid. So it's that sort of simple stuff. I
Yeah.
don't think you realize, when you first start out, you're trying to cut your costs, you're trying to keep things tight. But sometimes you just got to say, no, I actually need that. Just get on and,
Sure.
invest in it for yourself.
So tell us about the company now. What do you do? Where are you? And who are your ideal customers, I guess, would be the place to
So
start.
sorry, we help clients achieve regulated compliance and sustainability by providing expert advice and training. Uh, and we're primarily involved in the waste management sector. So any company or council that's handling waste. So that could be landfill operations, transfer, treatment facilities, composting plants, anybody that's handling waste, and a lot of local authorities. We also do a lot of work in the NHS, for example, in terms of clinical waste. And our key is we've got a knowledge of the legislation, we've got good training people, and we'll go in and help them, you know, comply with the regulations and quite often save themselves, lots and lots of cash. The sort of simple example is in the NHS, for example, if you've got recycled material, that'll maybe cost them 60 quid a ton. If it's residual waste, it'll cost them £150 a ton. If it's orange bag clinical waste, it's costing them 400 quid a ton. And if it's sharps boxes, it's costing them almost a grand a ton.
Yeah.
So if you can make sure the waste is in the right place, there's massive opportunities for savings. And that applies to all companies that produce waste. And there's there's still to this day a real lack of understanding of how to manage waste, both sustainably and effectively and efficiently for companies.
Okay. So, and what's your role in the company now as the company director? Do you still do consultancy work, or are you more corner
I,
office?
I am trying really hard to work on the business and not in the business.
Yeah.
Having said that, I've just spent the last hour this morning doing doing some consultancy work. So we have we actually had our quarterly meeting with staff yesterday, and that was the very clear message I was giving to staff, saying, look, I need to step away from not step away from the business, but step up in the business, and actually the management team need to start looking after this business moving forward.
So what's been you mentioned earlier in a previous role you were like a sponge, you just learn as much as you can. You seem like a sponge to me, like you're always looking to learn. What would you say was your biggest learning as a business owner?
I think the biggest thing I learned pretty early on is you need your networks. You need your networks of people, and I'm again, I've been fortunate. I'm involved because we're involved in waste management. We've got a thing called the Chartered Institute of Waste Management, um, and I've been involved with them for probably about 30 years now. And I've got people in that network. You know, if I've got a problem I don't know the answer to, I know somebody that does know the answer. And if they don't know the answer, they'll know somebody that does. So I think I've got, in terms of the waste work, I've got a really good network. And also over time, I think I've built up a pretty good network of just, HR lawyers, accountants, people you can just phone up and say, and half the time it's not, the account, I'll phone the accountant with someone and it's not totally relevant to the work they do for us, but they know the business and they'll quite happily provide, a bit of advice.
Okay, so have a good strong network of people
You
behind
need you
you.
need to, yeah, a
Yeah.
good strong network.
Um, and has there been somebody in particular who's pushed you or inspired you that's had a real impact? Anybody specific? Anybody we
I
want to
think
give a shout out to?
I think there's a few. I think there's a few people. Robert Drummond, I mentioned the first customer. I think he was quite. This is sadly he passed away last year. He was an incredible person. He used to sit in his office and just phone customers, and the knowledge he had about the sector. He was the deepest, darkest Ayrshire, but he knew what was going on across the sector across Scotland. And I used to share a bit of gossip with him, and he used to equally share a bit of gossip with myself. So he was one. And another one that I quite like to mention is a guy called Craig Chandler. So he came out of the military when I was a bar. He came out of the military and was looking for a job. He'd initially applied to bar as a crane driver, and we were looking for a weighbridge operator or something at the moment at the time. And he came and joined us, and he was very much the basis. The military is very much, yes, you need to do what the army says, but you also need to develop yourself. And I was probably fairly lax at that time in terms of, I sort of took the view, I'll work hard for the company and the company will look after me, rather than his view was, no, you actually need to spend a bit of time investing in yourself and doing qualifications and so on. So he probably started that journey in terms of making sure I got my assessor's qualifications and so on, that allowed me the qualifications to then set up in business. And interestingly enough, he's actually just moved to a role in the Falkland Islands of all places.
Wow.
So be quite intrigued to go and I'm trying to work out how I can go and visit him actually. So because I think the Falklands has always fascinated me for some reason. So,
I can't think of anybody who's gone and moved to the Falklands for work.
well, there you go. No,
Uh,
he's doing there. He's doing health and safety roles for the Falkland Island government.
you never know where the journey's going to take you.
Absolutely.
I couldn't find Scotland on a map the first time I came here uh, to visit with my now wife. Um, and I still wake up sometimes 26 years later and wonder how did I
How,
get here?
how you got here?
Exactly. So what's been your biggest challenge during the years, and who's been the person or people that have actually helped you through the challenge?
I think we've had any, real insurmountable challenge, but we've very much grown organically. So, we invest in people, we grow, and so on. I think the biggest challenge is getting and retaining staff. We have, often we've gone through this cycle of we take on graduates, we train them up. 2 years later, they're just, in my view, they're just getting useful, and then they go off to Scottish Power or SEC or something because they've now got a degree and 2 years experience, and we can't match
Mm,
the salary. So that has been an ongoing issue. I think there was a period I was explaining this to somebody the other day. Probably, I think it's probably I'm currently doing the Help to Grow program at University of West of Scotland. So there's business owners there, and I was sort of explaining that probably going back 10 years ago, I remember sort of head in hands thinking I've created a monster. We just had with staff issues, with things not working right. It just wasn't going well at all. And there was a bit of and it was basically meaning I was doing work I didn't particularly enjoy doing and all that sort of stuff. And that was really a step back, get the right HR people involved, to provide the right advice, and get the sleeves rolled up and get it sorted out. Um, and I think you learn I think the one thing I'm quite conscious is you actually learn what you're not good at. And if you're not good at it, you need to find somebody that is good at it to you know take up that. And there is a tendency to employ the same people that have the same style as yourself and so on
sure.
and almost you almost view conflict as a bad thing, whereas the right conflict is often a good thing in terms of challenging ideas and things.
100%. And and you said early in the conversation you took an operations role and it wasn't easy.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and when you went and did your, you started off kind of as a consultant and you had one client and you're like, this is too easy. And
Mhm.
where there's people, there's problems. And
Yeah,
I think and it doesn't mean that they're bad people. It's just people have challenges, conflicts with each other. They don't, if you hire somebody that's not like you, that might be what you need, but then you're going to feel resistance
yeah.
and we let ego get in the way as well, don't we? So, there's that ego that stops us from saying, do you know what? I don't know everything.
Mm,
I need somebody who's better at this than me.
yeah.
Um, so, but yeah, but where there's people, there's problems. And I guess when we grow our business, the more people, the more problems, the more customers, the more problems.
Yeah. But I used to always kid on that, everybody, when you first start out, everybody's, oh, it must be great being self-employed. You do what you want and all the rest. I said, no, it's not, because all you end up with is 10 bosses
Yeah.
or 20 bosses. You just end up you view every customer as your boss. I need to get this job done. I need to get that job done. And that was one of the big earning, or a couple of big early learnings I knew was to start with. I would go to client sites and then work at night to get quotes out, and I would work weekends and so on. And then I got to stage, I thought, this is ridiculous. I need to, you know, don't need to do that. So first of all, I cut down the sort of weekend working, and then gradually I cut down the night working. Uh, but one thing I was always clear about is what I would call sowing the seeds. You've got to always be reaching out to people, making contact. And the biggest danger I had when I first started was you would get really busy in a job, and then suddenly you would think, oh, hang on a minute here, that job's about to finish, and I've got nothing to replace it.
Nothing in the pipeline.
And it's that pipeline, and you had to be really conscious about making sure you kept in touch with people, just engaged with them, and so on. And latterly, I was probably slightly better at, yeah, I've got nothing in the pipeline next week. Let's actually take some time off and enjoy it, because I know the following week I have got stuff in the pipeline and I'm going to be really busy again. And allowing yourself to do that is pretty difficult, particularly at the start.
So, what's the next big thing for you and your business over the next few years? What's your number one area for opportunity and growth?
But we're in an interesting space in terms of waste management consultancy. We're really specialised. We've got a good team, a huge interest across the UK. You know, carbon agenda, government agenda, simpler recycling down in England. Lots and lots of work being done. We've got this thing called extended producer responsibility coming in, where producers have to fund councils for recycling. So potentially there's a lot of money going to go into to councils. So we're sitting, I would say, in a good place in terms of we've got a good team, got a really good structure in terms of how we're actually set up. So we are viewing the next 5 years as a real growth opportunity. And that will probably mean, we're based in Ayr, which, there's probably better places to have an office, but I can walk along the beach to the office, so that's why it's based in Ayr. So we'll be looking at offices around the country, with you know, lots of new staff, hopefully. Uh, but I am very conscious of trying to make sure that I'm not working in the business. I've got a pretty clear strategy in terms of the next 2 or 3 years to make sure I'm working on the business.
Is there a temptation to get in to work in the business? Do you
Oh, totally.
enjoy that? You enjoy
Totally. That's what I enjoy. I enjoy going out to see clients and sorting problems out for them and doing it. So the danger is I go out and have to do it now because I get too busy. So that's I've got to wean myself off that and make sure what I try and do now is if I am going to do that, I'll take somebody with me, and that person can then pick up the pieces that I abandoned behind myself.
good
Uh,
idea? Somebody
but I
just
think that there's a real challenge that some of the customers know Albion as me, and it's only me they want to deal with, and that's you've got to manage that transition as well and say no, this member of staff here actually understands this better and will
yeah.
do a better job for you than I will now.
Well, congratulations on not naming the company after you. So at least that's a good start.
Yeah,
A lot of business owners I meet who have that issue,
yeah.
the company is their name.
Yeah. Well, the story around the name was there is a story to that actually. So I think business owners you can overthink it. You can totally overthink the name. And one of the bits of advice that was given to me was, if you call it your name, then how are you going to be able to grow? Are you going to be able to look as big as you want? And to be honest, when I started, I had no clue whether I wanted to just continue myself or whether I wanted to actually employ staff. But I suppose I was fairly young, when I started off. I was in early 30s. Uh, but I racked my brains and racked my brains to think of a name. And at the time, we were living in a converted house on Carrick Road in Ayr. And one day I walked out and I looked, and etched into the gatepost was Albion House, because the house used to be owned by Albion Motors, and it used to be used as a training school for Albion Motors. So I thought, well, if I could have the address as Albion Environmental, Albion House, 24B Carrick Road, because it was a converted property, that people will not realise that's just my bedroom in my house. And that's where the name Albion Environmental came from.
Love it. Love it. Steal if you can't think of a name,
Just
just
steal it.
steal it.
So the office I'm sitting in at the moment is now, we've actually officially made this Albion House in here. So that's registered with the post office.
Good story. Finally, Alistair, what advice would you have for a business owner or would-be business owner who are going out and trying it on their own?
Go for it. It's good fun. It's hard work, but it's good fun.
Hard work,
Uh,
good fun. Yeah.
I think you've got to really think through the revenue you need and be quite clear about that. If you're effectively trying to replace your salary, you know, what salary do you need? What do you need to earn a month, and how are you going to do that? And you're not going to do that by, you can't plan that to do that by working 7 days a week. You've got to be saying, I'm going to get fee earning work based on 3.5 or 4 days a week. Because there is that just sheer amount of just admin faff of, you know, invoicing, quoting, all that sort of stuff you need to do to get yourself up and running.
Yeah, you need to have a good understanding of the financials. Like you don't have to be an accountant,
Yeah,
but we know that people, individuals in their personal lives don't manage their finances well.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so what makes us think we can just become a company director and a business
Uh,
owner and
Absolutely.
suddenly we're managing cash flows and reading our P&L statements and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think a fundamental understanding of money
Yeah, I
probably.
remember the accountant I used right at the start. He was a real traditional accountant that dealt with most of the farms in Ayrshire. And I remember going into him and saying, like, "This is what I intend to do." And he never said to me, but I distinctly came out of that office thinking, "He's given me 6 months, and then I'll be looking for a job." And fair play to the accountant when I went back in with my first year's set of accounts. He shook my hand and said, "That's a pretty impressive set of results. Well done. I gave you 6 months when you first came in to see me." And I was like,
Yeah.
so that was quite comforting.
Yeah.
But it was quite comforting that I'd actually read. Yeah, he was thinking that.
Yeah.
But that sort of, in a way, that sort of drives you to, like, I'm gonna prove him wrong. I'm gonna prove him wrong. And I actually had a competitor in the training side that I'd actually spoken to about working under his centre, his training centre, and then the discussions I had with him weren't very pleasant. And every time after I met him, he would always say to me, you know, "Oh, it's when you get to a year in business, it gets really hard, and next year it'll be, oh, it's when you get 2 years in business, it gets really hard." And so it went on for about 8 or 9 years, and the more he said that to me, the more I knew I was a thorn in the side.
That's funny. That's great. Um, Alistair, we've come to the end of our time together, the end of our chat. I've loved hearing your story. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank
Um,
you very much for having me. And could I have a little plug for? We also have a podcast called Rubbish Talk, which episode 55 is out now, and it's all about trying to explain the complexity of waste management, and we do that by having an interview with a different person from the sector. So if you are interested in the environment, sustainability, we try and keep it light-hearted. We occasionally have a moan and a grumble about things, but we do have a different guest from the sector and some quite influential people in the waste management sector every fortnight.
and I'll stick the link in with
That
the
would be
podcast as well, so people
magic.
can look for the link. It'll be there.
Perfect. Thank you very
Alistair
much.
Meldrum from Albion Environmental. Thanks so much for being on the Founders Chair today.
Thank you.
And thanks to all the listeners. Keep a lookout for more podcasts coming soon, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks very much. Bye bye.